I'm Jessie Biaggi, and I represent SSALD, Special Services and Learning Difference PTA Committee on Mercer Island. And I'm here with Michelle Ritter representing Parent Edge. And SSALD and Parent Edge wanted to partner to bring Mr. McLeod, who Michelle will introduce in a moment, to help everyone gather the skills that they need to help their kids because executive functioning is a hot topic right now, and a lot of people asked for this sort of seminar. This is the first of four, and the next one will be on May 5th, same time. And do they need to register separately, Michelle, for that?
Nope, it's the same Zoom link. And so as long as you're registered, you'll get another reminder.
Okay, excellent. So if you've registered for this, you're already registered for the whole series. And I have put in the chat the a link to Island Books, Mr. McLeod's book, and also a link to his website where you can access his podcast from there. So, Michelle?
Great. Thank you, Jessie. As Jessie mentioned, my name is Michelle Ritter, and I am with Mercer Island Parent Edge. And for those of you who don't know, both SSALD and Mercer Island Parent Edge are part of the Mercer Island PTA Council. So each of the school units are represented on the PTA Council, and your donations to your PTA help support programs like this. So thank you to anyone who has donated to your PTA. It helps us bring these great programs to our community so that we can have a dialogue on these important topics that we know will help us all be better parents so that we can support our kids. I am happy to introduce our speaker this evening, Mike McLeod. If you haven't visited his website, it's Grow Now ADHD, full of lots of wonderful information. Mike is an internationally and nationally known speaker. He provides specialized support in ADHD, executive functioning, social executive functioning, and parent coaching. With over 20 years of experience, you're going to be amazed at some of the great information. I have had an opportunity to hear him speak, and I told him, I said, it's the first time I walked away from a presentation on executive functioning and had some tangible things that I felt like I could really do at home. So I know you'll all be looking forward to that. As Jessie mentioned, Mike is the author of the Executive Function Playbook and the Executive Function Playbook in Action. And as we mentioned, we'll put the link in the chat so that if you're interested in accessing those books, you can continue to learn. So I'd like to introduce Mike for part one of our Executive Function skills for parents. So take it away, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you, Jessie. Thank you guys so much for setting this up. I'm so excited. I was just recently in Mercer Island, training two of the elementary schools out there. That was fantastic. And now it's so great to, continue to see such proactiveness from all of you that are here and spending your evening here with me. This means a lot to me. I'm so incredibly excited. So my name is Michael McLeod. I'm an ADHD and executive functioning specialist. And this is really what I do now is I travel the country and internationally. I train entire school districts, private schools, religious schools, charter schools, and I do lots and lots of parent training and professional training to really spread the most up-to-date research on ADHD and, of course, overall executive functions. So whether you have a child diagnosed with ADHD or not, this information will still also apply to you. I'm so incredibly passionate about this topic because, we right now we are currently in the worst youth mental health crisis of all time. The kids are absolutely hurting right now. There's never been a harder time to be a kid, never been a harder time to be a teen, a teacher, a parent, parenting crisis, a teacher crisis. It's a really, really difficult time. And it's very important that we spread the most up-to-date information about executive functions because executive functions are the greatest predictor of success for human beings. You need executive functioning skills to move out of your parents' house, get a job, keep a job, make friends, and keep friends. Developing executive functioning skills are a far greater predictor of success than your grades, your GPA, your SAT scores, any diploma you get, any of those things. You need executive functioning skills. And right along with this youth mental health crisis, we see overall declining executive functioning skills. The kids of today are simply not developing executive functioning skills at the natural and organic rate that many of us did when we were kids. So things are definitely wrong because we as adults have stolen many things from childhood and adolescence that are crucial for developing these skills, like outdoor unstructured play, boredom, struggle. We're going to learn today about why those things are crucial experiences for kids to develop executive functions. We're going to break down all this research, talk about what ADHD truly is, what executive functions truly are, because most people still think that executive functioning is time management and organization, messy backpacks and messy folders. And that's incredibly outdated information. So we'll break it all down and talk all about what's going on. There's my daughter Eden, a picture of her when she first sat up. She's now 5.5 upstairs screaming. But hey, I got things to do. My wife's got it handled. So the research study on the Gronow model of internal skills took place at the Stratford Friends School over here in Pennsylvania, Newtown Square. I'm over here in the Philadelphia region. I like to give a shout out to my sources and my references at the beginning of the presentation, so you guys have a general idea of who I'm talking about, so you can look into these great individuals, this Mount Rushmore of ADHD, if you will, and you can look into them to get more information. Of course, number one is Dr. Russell Barkley, the worldwide leader on ADHD and executive functioning, absolutely second to none. Nobody has published more research, nobody's published more books, worked with more individuals across a lifespan than Dr. Russell Barkley. So if you are an ADHD parent, you have ADHD yourself, you have ADHD kids, you have to read Dr. Russell Barkley's books. You know, it is all true research-based, evidence-based information. None of this social media pseudoscience with the nervous system. It's all just real information about what is truly happening. He has a fantastic YouTube channel as well. He just recently posted his final video and went into full retirement, but his YouTube channel is an unbelievable treasure trove of information where he breaks down all the pseudoscience that's out there on social media. The next is Sarah Ward, her and Kristen Jacobson from Cognitive Connections. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of her. A lot of their work has really become a gold standard in terms of executive functioning treatment. Sarah and Kristen are also national speakers, so you can type their name into YouTube, the podcast app, and you'll be blown away by the information they share. The next is Ryan Wexelblatt, who's the ADHD dude. Him and I do the ADHD parenting podcast together, which I'm sure every single one of you like and download every single week. Everyone likes and subscribes. I check the stats, and all of the downloads are on the island of Mercer Island. So thank you. Thank you all for being such wonderful listeners of the podcast. But yeah, definitely check it out. It's called the ADHD Parenting Podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's in the top 10% of the top 1% of all podcasts in terms of downloads and listens and everything. And it's, you know, we pride ourselves on sharing real straight facts about ADHD parenting and none of that fluffy feel-good parenting advice you find on social media that gets likes and shares and follows, you know, real evidence-based information. And today we're going to be breaking down the most up-to-date research on ADHD and executive functions. And it's these two groups right here, the Harvard Center and the Stanford Parenting Center. Then, of course, we have CHADD, which in my professional opinion should be the very first thing given to parents as soon as they get an ADHD diagnosis for their child, because ADHD parenting can be incredibly isolating. You know, the things that go on behind the walls of the home and the behaviors that are happening when no one else is around. It's just mom and dad and the unconditional relationships. And maybe they're doing fine at school, but at home, there's all these big behaviors. You know, meeting other parents that are going through the same thing can be incredibly beneficial to parents with ADHD. So let's start to break this down. So obviously we're going to talk about ADHD, executive function, diagnosis or not. But to start with ADHD, we now know that individuals with ADHD, this is a true disorder of the brain. Individuals with ADHD have a different brain compared to individuals of the same age and same gender, a true neurodevelopmental disorder. You are most often born with it. It is hereditary, so that means one or both parents may have it as well. Screens do not cause ADHD. Screens are not going to make you neurodiverse. They can cause temporary ADHD symptoms that can go away after a detox from screens, but it's not going to cause ADHD. But screens can cause a significant delay in executive functioning skills, which we're going to talk about the connection between ADHD and executive functions. So we know that ADHD is a true neurodiverse population when we are able to check off all three main boxes. The brain is structured in a more disorganized way, it functions more chaotically, and it develops slower. So the brain develops over the first 30 years of life. It is not until you are 30 years old when the brain is fully developed and you have your full cognitive functioning. And the brain develops from back to front, meaning the front part of the brain is the last part to develop. And the front part of the brain is executive functioning. So it takes 30 years of relationships and experiences to build that prefrontal cortex. Not worksheets, not lectures, not workbooks, not tutoring, none of those things. It is relationships and experiences that builds that prefrontal cortex. And what do we know about today's youth when it comes to relationships and experiences? They're not having meaningful in-person play-based relationships, and they're not having as many varied experiences as needed. So that's a very important thing as we take a deeper dive into this research. So we know that the ADHD brain is this prefrontal cortex, the home of executive functions. And there are specific parts with these great MRI studies, CT studies. We can take a deeper dive into the specific parts of the brain that are impacted by ADHD, that are impacted in structure, function, and development. And we go into these 5 specific regions where we have reduced regional volumes, and we see the same parts of the brain impacted by ADHD are the same areas that deal with emotions, self-awareness, and self-regulation. Then we have the limbic system, the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, where we feel our emotions. We can transition from our emotions. We can internalize our emotions and self-soothe and self-regulate. Much smaller and much less active in the ADHD brain. So now, based on this information, it seems like there's an emotional aspect to ADHD. And for all the ADHD parents that are here tonight, would you all agree that there's an emotional aspect to ADHD? I'm sure every single one of you would. But if we were to look in the most recent edition of the DSM, the Diagnostic Standards Manual, that lists all of the criteria needed to get diagnosed with ADHD, how often will you see the word emotions listed in that criteria? 0 times. You're going to see a lot about hyperactivity in kids who can't sit still. You're going to see a lot about inattentiveness in kids who daydream, but nothing about emotions. And this is a true emotional-based disorder. Then we have the anterior cingulate, where we make our social and emotional decisions. Much less activation with ADHD. So now you're telling me there's a social component to ADHD? How come every single day there's a multi-$1,000 neuropsych evaluation that comes across my desk where it was recommended to the parents, oh, only take meds on school days, not on the weekend, not over the summer. Then the kid gets sent off to summer camp and gets kicked out after 2 days. Right? The ADHD is only going to affect him at school and taking notes and those kinds of things. But we know this affects far more than school, emotions, and there's a social component as well. So we have to truly understand that executive functions are all encompassing. And ADHD is not just an academic-based disorder.
Mike,
So
can I ask
really,
you a question?
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yep.
For folks on the call who might not have a child that's diagnosed with ADHD, but they recognize that they have some maybe deficits in executive functioning, is it possible that kids without ADHD can also still have challenges with executive functioning?
Absolutely, 100%. Yes. So that's something that I was getting to here. Absolutely. So right now we're talking about, what's the differences here with ADHD. So this information applies to kids diagnosed with ADHD and not ADHD. So as I was getting to here, ADHD is being renamed executive functioning developmental disorder because ADHD is the preeminent disorder of executive functions. But like I said in the beginning of the presentation, we're seeing a youth mental health crisis and declining executive functioning skills. So we see amongst the majority of our youth lagging executive functioning skills, lagging independent skills, whether it's the neurodiverse ADHD brain causing those issues, or whether it is, screens, relationships, experiences, whatever it may be. So can you have executive functioning challenges and not have ADHD? Sure. You could be screen addicted. You could be depressed. You can have anxiety. You can have dyslexia. You can have all these different things and have executive functioning challenges and not have ADHD. Executive functions are true life independent skills, and ADHD is a disorder of the executive functioning system. But as we're seeing in today's youth with their youth mental health crisis, it's due to the lagging executive functioning skills in many, many ways. Not all, of course. Nothing is one size fits all. So that's an important thing for all parents to remember is nothing is one size fits all. Right now on this presentation, all I can do is talk about the majority of kids. Obviously, there's things that I'm going to say tonight that may not apply to you because every single kid is different. Every single kid with ADHD is different. Every single kid with their executive functioning is different. So with this prefrontal cortex overall, we know that it's the home of executive functions, this part of the brain right here. And this is truly what separates human beings from all other living species. We have executive functions. We have a prefrontal cortex. They don't. So what does this prefrontal cortex do that makes it the home of such a crucial set of skills? Humans are the only species on this planet that can sustain a behavior over time in the absence of a direct consequence. So what does that mean? We can start applying to college, filling out our Common App, our college application, our letters of recommendation, our essay, years before we ever step foot on a college campus. We can start working to get our driver's license years before we ever sit in the driver's seat of a car. We can work towards career goals, health goals, fitness goals, where we want to work, who we want to be with, what we want to do, years before we're ever able to feel the fruits of all that labor. So with our executive functioning system, with our prefrontal cortex, we have the ability to put in the work right here in the now, even though the consequences of that work, whether it's a positive consequence you want to attain or a negative consequence you want to avoid, that could be months and years down the road, but you're still able to put in the work now. And that's executive functioning. Because with the power of this prefrontal cortex, human beings have this ability to pause, to stop self from what you would have done on impulse. There's that word impulsive that's so synonymous with these kids, right? They're so impulsive. They're so impulsive because we're missing that ability to pause. And then in this pause is where all the magic happens. We do what I refer to as the most vague phrase of all time. We stop and we think and we aim our behavior towards the future. And that's that internal system of checks and balances, that internal GPS that allows kids to project themselves into the future, know what to do, and be independent without so much adult help. As kids get older, kids are supposed to do more and parents are supposed to do less. How's that working out? Right? Parents are finding themselves every single day operating under the mindset, nothing gets done unless I step in. My kids will be late to school every day if I'm not a drill sergeant. They'll never do their homework every day if I'm sitting right next to them. Nothing gets done unless I step in. Parents are supposed to do less as kids get older. That's not happening because they're not noticing and doing, stopping and thinking, which we're going to learn is really stop, visualize, talk to yourself, and then do. Because executive functioning is just a fancy term for your imagination. And when do we build our imagination? When we play, when we're bored, when we experience struggle. Kids today don't have to use their imagination like we did when we were a kid, and it's causing a lot of problems. And all of this technology at home, at school, affects the development of executive functions. So the ability to pause and stop and think is a huge aspect of developing these independent skills. So it's the ability to not only create motivation, but sustain that motivation over time, even though there is a delay. And that word delay sounds so simple, But think about, how does the youth of today, all you parents here today, ask yourselves, how does my child deal with delays? If it's not instant gratification, how do they handle a delay? How's their overall frustration tolerance? Do they have enough resiliency to tolerate boredom? Or are they going to grab their phone right out of their pocket every chance they get? Because I'm telling you right now, your child's ability to delay gratification, your child's ability to persevere through boredom, their frustration tolerance is a much greater predictor of success than their grades. So these executive functioning skills are the most crucial set of skills, and they become more important as kids get older, and they should do more, and parents should do less, and teachers should do less. And that IEP should probably go to a 504, and that 504 should probably go down. Obviously, nothing's one size fits all. Remember that as I say, as I make those statements, nothing is one size fits all. But we're going to want to decrease accommodations. We're going to want to put more on the child to experience these things, because there's not a single college in the country that can accommodate a child the way an IEP or a 504 can. And America now leads the world in first semester college dropouts. And the amount of these kids that got accepted to the college for all the right reasons, they had the grades, they had the SAT scores, but they had so many accommodations that are just not going to work at college or the workplace. And there's no one going to college with them to say, wake up, check your school email, go to your office hours, put your phone away. It's sink or swim as soon as they get there, right? And we need to build these skills from birth to 18. So a lot of schools like to bring me in August and train their staff before any of the kids show up or any of the students show up for school. So I train the staff during their PD days in August before the actual first day of school. So a couple of years back, I thought I would reach out to the teachers and ask them what they think the biggest red flags are for executive dysfunction, for kids that have executive dysfunction or lagging executive functioning skills. And here's the list they sent me of what they felt lagging executive functioning skills were. And you'll take a look at this list, and I'm sure many of these apply to you and your child, and they may drive you completely insane, like doing homework but not turning it in. What a natural phenomenon that is, right? That was the best part about being a kid, was turning your homework in and getting it out of your face. But now they'll do it and not even hit submit, right? So here's the list that the teachers gave of what they thought red flags were. But now, based on the most up-to-date research, these are the most up-to-date red flags. When every single day starts to look the same for them, they wake up, they go to school, they go home, they stay home. And the vast majority of their experiences are, the vast majority of their childhood and adolescence are the walls of the home, the walls of the school. There's no real true third place. The majority of their life is, I'm a student, or I'm a son and I'm a daughter. There's no, I'm a musician, I'm an artist, I'm an athlete, I'm the robotics person, I'm this, I'm that. The importance of having a third place, not tutoring, not Kumon, not, things that are just an extension of school. We need them to have an identity away from school and away from the family. That concept of a third place, you can look that up, of how important that is to youth mental health. And then a lack of diverse face-to-face social experiences. So many of us have been duped by big tech's predatory marketing that technology is a social tool. Your kid's going to be left out if they don't have a phone, if they don't have Snapchat, if they don't have Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft. That's the best way to sell a product, is fear-based marketing. This is just how kids socialize now. They need these to be prepared for a tech-filled future. And we all got sold a massive lie. We all gave these kids technology expecting it to improve their social lives, and it just made them more antisocial, and they're spending more time at home and in their room behind closed doors. So the lack of diverse face-to-face social experiences really negatively impacts social executive functions, and that cannot be understated. Human beings are social animals. When we're talking about the hierarchy of needs, food, water, shelter, relationships, and playing online games with someone, even if you're doing FaceTime, wearing a headset, that's not a real social experience. Snapchat's not a real social experience. That's not, the social areas of the brain don't even light up when they're doing those things. There's no body language and facial expressions and being in the same room as someone. That's just an extension of virtual experiences during COVID. And those things just became normalized. Really? So right here we have the ADHD brain, a great image here to help us understand exactly what's happening. So the back of the brain is where we know, where we have our information, where we have our IQ, and the front of the brain is where we perform, where we show what we know. So for example, a teacher could take her class down to the library for library time. She could pull the one, hyperactive kid aside and say, "Look, when you go in that library, you have to be quiet." And the teacher can repeat it 25 times to the child. The child can repeat back 25 times, "Yes, I have to be quiet." What is most likely going to happen when the teacher opens that door to the library and the child goes inside? They're probably not going to be very quiet, are they? Because they are at the mercy of their impulses. They were not able to show what they know. Was it a question of knowledge? No, they know library equals quiet. But once they're in there, they could not perform and show the world what they know, perform in real time in the natural environment. And what do we now know about so many ADHD executive dysfunction kids? They have an average to above average, gifted, twice exceptional IQ. The IQ is there. They can hack their school Chromebook, play Minecraft all day at school, and still get straight A's. But how are the life skills? How are the actual social relationships? How are the independent skills outside of just memorizing facts, right? We have to be able to combine these things. We have to be able to perform and show what we know in real time. So ADHD is not an attention disorder, it is a performance disorder, an inability to execute with your executive functions and show what you know with that huge, very strong IQ. So in the past, both executive functions and ADHD were looked at as this external behavioral based disorder. Everything was based on what we can see with our eyes. ADHD was hyperactive kids who can't sit still, and it was inattentive kids who just daydream and look around all the time. And it was the same thing with executive functions. It was external organization, external time management, messy backpacks, messy folders, messy bedrooms, messy lockers. And both were seen as school-based issues. ADHD will affect you at school, and executive functions will affect you our skills needed for school. So it was all external behavioral based information. And this external behavioral based information led to the rise of all of these external things right here. So here we have that red countdown clock, which I can almost guarantee is in at least one person's house as we speak right now. And we have to think to ourselves, who's the one always setting the timer? It's the parents doing it. The parents are setting the timer and it goes off. And yeah, it might help with the transition. It might help them end their screen time. Who knows? But it's not the kid becoming independent. If I were to check every single person, every single parent on here right now, if I were to grab your smartphone, you probably have 10 to 15 alarms in the clock app. But the question is, did your parents drive down to your house, grab your phone and do it for you? Or did you do it yourself? I've never worked with a single child who grew up with that red countdown clock in their house that became independent with it and then brought it to college and showed all their roommates, like, "Hey guys, I'm getting to class on time this year." Or brought it to the altar on their wedding day, like, "Hey, I made it." Right? That's not how it works. We have to become independent. It has to be an internal thing. This is just an external temporary band-aid. Then we have this wristwatch, which will buzz in class and remind kids to raise their hand and remind kids to pay attention. Obviously, something that is not treating an internal skill and actually quite demeaning to the child. Then we have the first ever, that third picture right there is the first ever FDA approved iPad game that will cure your child's ADHD. That's 100% real. It's called Endeavor RX, and it's an absolute joke. Basically, with that game, they basically did the impossible, and they created the first ever video game that ADHD kids don't want to play. So congratulations to them. It makes them say, "Hey, I'd rather go outside and play." So maybe it does work, but just in general, it's not something that is going to assist you. Then we have our morning charts and our reward charts, which we know have their time and place, but have to fade back over time. There's far too many high schoolers these days with morning charts and reward charts, and parents saying, "Do that, you get your screen time. Don't do that, you'll lose your screen time." Dangling a carrot over a kid's head to get them to do things is not sustainable. Then we have a young man here being prompted to use Alexa for an alarm and not doing it independently. So all of this focus on external behavioral based led to the rise of all of these executive functioning coaches, which parents have to understand is a totally unregulated field. There's no certification, there's no training to make a website to say, I'm an executive functioning coach. Anyone can do it. It's unregulated, non-medical. And because of that, the vast majority of coaches out there, not all, tend to come to your house and sit with the child, help them clean out their backpack, clean out their folders, and sit with the kid while they work on their school issued computer. Make sure they don't have 75 different tabs open at once, and make sure they're not sneaking YouTube time during homework. And then what happens when the clock hits the end of the hour and that very expensive adult now has to go home to their own family? You now have an ADHD child or an executive dysfunction child that is highly prompt dependent on a very expensive adult and is only successful when that person is physically there. How is that helping? How is that helping ensuring that the person's only successful there? So a couple of years back, about 3 or 4 years back, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC came out and they saw that, outcomes were really not improving for ADHD kids. And they realized that far too many professionals out there were not following the evidence-based guidelines. When parents were spending lots of money on neuropsych and evaluations and getting information on parent Facebook groups, kids with ADHD were being sent to non-evidence-based treatments. Things like talk therapy, counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, occupational therapy are not evidence-based for kids under 19 years of age with ADHD and executive dysfunction. There's a great website called effectivechildtherapy.org where you can, select any diagnostic label and it will list the actual evidence-based treatments. And remember, we talked earlier about how this is a performance disorder. He knew he was supposed to be quiet in the library, but he couldn't do it. So this concept that I can sign my kid up for talk therapy, counseling, CBT, and he can go to a therapist office or talk to a therapist on Zoom an hour a week, 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week, 5 hours a week. And that's going to make him want to come home and be on his phone less. That's going to make him want to scream and curse at mom less. That's going to make him want to do non-preferred tasks more. Absolutely not. That's not going to transfer from a session to the natural environment. That's why outcomes are not improving. So we need to look at what truly is evidence-based. The number one evidence-based recommendation for ADHD and executive functioning is parent training, because this is all about the point of performance. Parent training, teacher training, giving them evidence-based treatments on how to best help these kids and assist these kids and fade back prompts over time. Medication management for kids 6 and up, 7 and up when applicable. But we have to start looking at the internal long-term skill building instead of just over accommodating. And this is another huge part of the youth mental health crisis, is how we have over accommodated deficits like ADHD, anxiety, and all these different things, and actually cause them to snowball, get worse, and cause these kids to ruminate on their diagnostic labels and different things like that, instead of keeping that bar high and showing them as adults that we believe in them. So really what we need to do here is break down what executive functions truly are, because we have to move past all of this outdated viewpoints of time management and organization. So the first executive functioning skill is self-awareness. It is the very first executive skill to develop when they're little tiny babies. Little tiny babies recognize, hey, wait a second, when I cry, what happens? Mom and dad come and hold me and sing to me and rub my back and change me and give me milk. And when I smile in mom's face, what happens? She smiles back. I have control over my world. I am now self-aware. I can do things that affect the world around me, and I can do things that affect me. So it's one of the first executive skills to develop, but over time becomes one of the most delayed. And we see this in the middle school years, when it's no longer we're all friends, we're all family elementary school. Now kids are starting to join their own little friend groups and cliques and groups, and the lack of self-awareness can really negatively impact them socially. And that's the real true heartbreak of ADHD and executive dysfunction, is the social executive functions. Kids that are so incredibly socially motivated and need those social relationships really struggling socially. So that's a huge part of it. Then we have self-regulation. This is what it's all about. Dr. Russell Barkley often refers to ADHD as self-regulation deficit disorder. It's not hyperactivity, it's the inability to regulate your body. It's not inattentiveness, it's the inability to regulate your thoughts. Self-regulation is the ability to regulate your emotions, your language, your body, your behavior in various environments towards various stimuli. All you parents here today, self-regulation is probably what you're dealing with most. Is the constant dysregulation, the constant fights, the constant arguments, the negative attention-seeking behaviors, the dopamine they get through conflict, arguing, negotiating. That's probably what you're seeing, is the lack of self-regulation. Then, of course, we have self-motivation towards non-preferred tasks. Can they independently motivate themselves to do things that don't offer instant gratification? Can they motivate themselves independently to do things that are not screen-based, that are not internet-based? Can they motivate themselves to persevere through boredom? Can they motivate themselves to do things that don't offer instant gratification? All very crucial skills to develop, especially before they leave for college. Then we have self-evaluation, the ability to learn from past experiences and apply it to the present moment. Very, very important. So, like, for example, you have two kids, one sibling might hit the other sibling, and then you say, up, you hit your brother, I'm taking your phone away for 24 hours. 24 hours go by, he gets his phone back. What happens in the next 2 seconds? He hits his sibling again. So here we have the four pillars of executive functions. And for decades, we thought executive functioning was just time management, organization, messy backpacks, messy folders. But think about it. You're going to have a messy backpack unless you're first self-aware that that's even a problem. Then you have to be able to self-regulate and self-motivate to do that incredibly boring task of cleaning a backpack. Then you have to be able to self-evaluate and say, hey, in 2 periods, I have science class. She's going to ask me to take out my lab notebook. Everyone else is going to do it right away, but I'm going to be the one person with dirty, crinkled papers for the first 15 minutes. I'm not going to like the way that feels, so I better do something about it now. So we did all of this external behavioral-based coaching for so long on executive functions, when really it's the lack of these internal skills. And the foundation of these skills, pillars always need a foundation to stand upon. The foundation is self-language and their internal GPS. This is that stop and think feature. It's not stop and think, it's stop and use your self-language. Stop and follow your internal GPS. That is independent skills. That's executive functions, which is stop, visualize with your nonverbal working memory, make a mental movie in your mind of what you know you have to do, and then talk to yourself to make that mental movie come true. That's nonverbal and verbal working memory working together in harmony. Like, for example, you're sitting downstairs with your son or your daughter, and you say, go upstairs and clean your room. What's most likely going to happen? They're going to walk upstairs, open the door to their room, and get distracted by the first shiny object they see. Nothing's going to get cleaned. Because what has to happen before they ever even open the door to that room? They have to have a mental movie in their mind of what their room looks like when it's clean. So they can have it visualized, be goal-oriented up here. And then once they're in their room, they're talking to themselves internally and privately with their verbal working memory, self-directed talk, self-stated intentions to work towards that image. That's self-language. That's the internal GPS. That's independent skills. I'm sure every single parent here today, you're probably still the frontal lobe, the executive functioning system for your child. You're probably the executive functioning system for your entire family. And here you are on a Zoom with me. What's happening around the house right now? Right? That's exactly it. We need you guys to do less so your kids can do more. Right? Because we need to build this internal GPS, build that self-language. Because the longer we act as their executive functioning, the longer these skills get delayed. Very, very important. So, of course, we know about academic executive functions, being a good student, getting your work done, following the rules. And most people think about ADHD and executive functions as an academic-based problem. But what do we now know? is school is not even the place where the majority of ADHD or executive dysfunction symptoms are seen. And that is really the home executive functions. You ever call your kids parent you ever call your kids teachers and describe how your kid is at home? And the teacher says, "Are we talking about the same kid here? He's an angel here at school. We don't see any of those behaviors at home." Because home executive functioning is where the majority of symptoms are seen. The ADHD brain responds so much better to school-based environments because school is structured with conditional relationships. Here's a bunch of peers around me that could choose to be my friend, choose not to be my friend. It's very conditional. And there's a very clear hierarchy. I'm the student, there's the teacher. I can very clearly get in trouble. It's very rigid, it's very black and white. It is structured with conditional relationships. Then you go home. Home is unstructured with unconditional relationships. And the black and white rigid ADHD brain has a very hard time comprehending this beautiful thing called unconditional love. If you look up unconditional love in the dictionary, what's it going to be a picture of? A mom. And who gets the majority of ADHD behaviors? The mom. Let's be honest, that's exactly what it is. So in their mind, it's, here's this person that I could say absolutely unspeakable things to. And I can say no to every single thing she asks me to do. But she's still going to tuck me in at night and give me the Wi-Fi password and buy me my favorite snacks. That throws off their mind. That throws off their whole concept of social reciprocity. And if that happens long enough where, it becomes high giving, low expectations, where the kid learns that this relationship works when all I do is take and no give, then it can filter into social. But it is the home that's the problem. And this is where this concept of masking came up on social media to help parents understand the difference between home and school. But really, it's just the difference in behaviors. And when things happen behind the walls of the home and it stays that deep, dark secret of the home of what happens behind closed doors, and we don't have other adults in their lives holding them accountable, then yeah, things can get pretty difficult in the home. Another reason why parent training is the number one recommendation. Then, of course, we have social executive functions, which in my personal opinion, my professional opinion, is one of the most beautiful things to come out of this neurodiversity movement of the past 10, 15 years, is just how ridiculous this concept of social skills are. All these social skills groups and lunch bunches and all of these different things, where they're highly structured, highly adult directed, focusing on external social skills like eye contact. First of all, neurotypicals don't do eye contact very well, do they? And it's also very culturally based. Then focusing on things like circles of communication, topic maintenance, things that just end up increasing their social anxiety when in social environments, because they're so focused on the rules of social, when every single social experience is different and fluid, right? There's no hard set rules. It's really the internal social executive functions, which is number one, perspective taking skills and understanding the thoughts and feelings you put in others' heads. There's also situational awareness, which is the ability to stand back and read the room before you enter a social environment. Social reciprocity, social relatedness. That's really what moves the needle. The whole reason of putting a child in a social skills group is for them to make friends and keep friends outside of that group to improve their overall social life and quality of life. Have you ever met a single child that went through years and years of social skills groups that actually ended up making friends outside of that group? Right? Because we're not focusing on what actually works, what actually builds these skills, these internal social executive functions. Right? So more severe executive dysfunction could be in all three areas. More mild could be two. Some kids with ADHD, executive dysfunction, thrive socially. But the problems are most often behind closed doors with the parents, with siblings in the home. So really, we use our executive functions when we turn away from all of the seductions of the moment, the phone in my pocket, the internet access, the iPad, the computer, the video games, the Fortnite, the Roblox, the Minecraft. And instead, we subject ourselves to boredom, to adversity, to hardships, to change a distant future or consequence. We delay gratification, that famous marshmallow test, right? We do what's hard now to improve our future later instead of constantly seeking instant gratification. All of this heavy screen use at home and at school is hardwiring their brains towards instant gratification, when delayed gratification is a massive predictor of success, right? So anytime they can escape boredom by being on a phone, we're delaying their executive functioning skills. And we're delaying their ability to sit, regulate, and learn. And screens are incredibly dysregulating. There's a lot of information online that screens are a regulation tool. That is nonsense. There's no science to back that up at all. Screens dysregulate, and we all know it. We see what they act like when they're not on their phones, when the screen time is up, when it's time for them to go to sleep, when it's time for them to do something difficult. It's heavily, heavily dysregulating. So really what we're looking to do here is help our kids go from prompt dependence on parents, on teachers, on accommodations, and move towards independence. This is exactly how we write our goals at Grown Out. We don't do what many of you have seen with IEPs and, 8 out of 10 trials with 90% accuracy as observed by. Instead, it's from prompt dependence to independence. For example, Johnny will utilize self-regulation safety plan with fading prompts towards independence. Johnny will initiate non-preferred writing task with fading prompts towards independence. This is the mindset I want every single parent here to have when they leave this presentation tonight, is where is my child most prompt dependent? Where am I still doing things for them they can do on their own? And how do I fade back those prompts immediately? How do I finally break this daily burden of thinking nothing gets done unless I step in? This is the ADHD paradox, right? You have a child who struggles with their executive functioning skills. Parents get incredibly frustrated, burnt out, and every day, nothing gets done unless I step in, where you unintentionally become a helicopter parent. You unintentionally become a permissive parent. You unintentionally save them from struggle. We unintentionally give them too many screens. We unintentionally overindulge the child to avoid conflict, and it snowballs into a much bigger problem. So we have to figure out where are they prompt dependent and how do we fade this back? And we take a look at the prompt hierarchy here. Full physical at the bottom, fully dependent, where you're basically doing the task for them. Then you're partially doing it. Then you're modeling how to do it. You're gesturing them to get them to start. You're giving them a verbal prompt. Then at the end, they see a visual, they know what to do, they do it. Because most parents, most of you are probably living at the verbal prompting stage. And earlier I mentioned how parent training is the #1 recommendation for ADHD and executive dysfunction. Well, what's the #1 rule of ADHD parent training? Use 90% less language. That's what you all have to remember. Language makes dysregulation worse. All of you here tonight, how are those verbal prompts working? Hey, get out of bed. Hey, put your phone away. Hey, come downstairs. Hey, get started on your homework. It's going in one ear, out the other. It's not working. And it's creating more of a fight. You're getting pulled into the argument vortex, the negotiation vortex. Language makes dysregulation worse. The more you talk, the more dysregulated they're going to get. If you go to an ADHD child and you say, go put your shoes on, you're giving them a fork in the road. They can put their shoes on and hear a quick good job, or not put their shoes on at all and have you chase them around the house for 3 hours. Which one are they going to pick? Right? So their instant gratification, time-blind brain is hardwired towards what's going to give me the most dopamine right now. Because they're missing their hindsight, their foresight, what I mentioned earlier, nonverbal working memory, learning from the past, self-evaluation, visualizing the future, self-motivation, self-regulation. So they're stuck in the now. So their brains are constantly seeking screens or conflict, screens or conflict. It's not attention deficit disorder, it's negative attention stimulation disorder. The dopamine they're getting from the fighting, the arguing, the negotiating. Every day you sit next to them to watch them do their homework, make sure they're on task, to sit with them and micromanage their academic performance. It ends up being a 5 hour fight over 10 minutes of homework every single day because it's not working, because their behaviors need an audience. And it's a very conflict seeking brain. Who better to get that from than the unconditional relationships at home through mom and dad, most often mom? That's exactly it. It's a negative attention seeking brain. So, how do we fade back the verbal prompts and bring in the visuals? Okay. So, I do want to make sure I will very quickly run through what are the true predictors of success. So, we talk about how executive functions are the greatest predictor of success for human beings as a whole. But let's break it down based on longitudinal studies. What are the three true predictors of success? What are the three things you need to make sure, based on 100 years of research, you need to make sure your child's doing these three things before they go to college? Number one, can they independently make friends and keep friends in person, in real life? Can they not only make the friends, but can they keep the friends over time? Real face-to-face social experiences, not Snapchat, not Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, not Brawl Stars, none of that stuff. Real face-to-face social relationships. Food, water, shelter, relationships. Crucial to independence, executive functions, and quality of life. Then the ability to independently manage your emotions. We all know as adults with our careers that all of us accomplished what we have now in life through stress, through challenge, through conflict. It wasn't an easy rainbow road for us. We had to deal with stress and difficult people and difficult experiences to accomplish what we have now. And if we let our emotions get the best of us, we would have failed. We kept persevering. So you get to a certain age where the tantrums at the floor and Target, the outbursts out in public and at school and disrespecting adults and all these different things aren't cute anymore. We have to be able to manage our emotions. We have to be able to deal with difficult people and difficult experiences without our emotions overriding our logic. And then the ability to independently manage your life and problem solving, knowing when you need to ask for a raise, get a second job, go grocery shopping, pay the bills, reach out to friends to maintain that relationship. All of these different things, knowing when to email teachers yourselves or seek or make your weekend plans without all this adult help. How do we find ways to do all of these things without all of that assistance? So very quickly, as before we do a little Q&A here. So here are my two books, the Parenting Playbook, the Executive Functioning Playbook, and the Parenting Workbook. So I did a lot of research on executive functioning workbooks for parents. And a lot of them were workbooks that required you to force your child to sit next to you and do the worksheets with you. And if your child truly has executive dysfunction, that's a pretty impossible task to get them to do some worksheets with you after school that have nothing to do with school. So this is a workbook where you sit down with your partner, your husband, your wife, a trusted friend, and you complete the worksheets with, as a parenting unit, as a caregiver unit, to help create the structure in the home needed to best help this child. So it's a workbook and the main book there. I have a Tech Executive Functioning Grow Plan on my website. Follow me on Instagram, send me a DM, let me know you were here today, and you can download this evidence-based tech plan to help you create some screen time structure in your home and really eliminate a lot of that screen dependence. Here's the ADHD Parenting Podcast I was telling you about. Definitely check that out. Lots of great episodes we have now. So definitely check that out, like and subscribe. And here's all my contact information here. So there's my email. We're going to be doing a number of these parent training sessions. Everyone here did a great job setting up multiple sessions. So this was just number one. The next one's going to be part two for home executive functions and what parents can do in the home. Obviously, we'll do a little Q&A and question and answer here, but we're going to dive even deeper into the evidence-based assistance for parents and how to end that argument vortex, that negotiation vortex, prompt dependence. So we're going to have 4 of these information hours together, and we're going to dive very, very deep. And the goal here is to make sure you guys feel incredibly empowered and you leave with lots and lots of hope. And that's what this is all about. That's what Grow Now is all about, is empowering parents and giving them hope. Because parenting today is really, really hard. And you guys can't pick up your phone without getting yelled at by another parenting guru about what you're doing wrong. Really what parents need is a lot of hope of, yeah, my kid can do hard things. Yeah, my kid can struggle. Yeah, my kid can experience natural consequences. Yeah, my kid can do anything, whether they have ADHD or not. There's no reason why ADHD kids cannot live a fully independent, positive, and successful life. And if we help them develop these executive functions from birth to 18, we can absolutely make that happen where the ADHD really doesn't affect their quality of life. And we can really make a lot of really positive change. And I think Mercer Island is a great place to do that. So I thank you all for coming. It's a great first night. We have 4 more of these. I hope to see you all there. And I'm happy to do any Q&A right now while we're here.
Mike, thank you. That was a lot of information. If other parents are like me right now, I'm feeling hopeful and also very anxious because that was a lot of new information, and I'm also trying to figure out how to process it all. I guess one question that came up in the chat was, whether the executive function deficit, is it nurture or nature? Do we know? Do we know the origin, or does it make sense to even, sometimes I think, does it matter?
Well, a huge part of it is like I said in the presentation, executive functions are developed through relationships and experiences. And many of you, many of us read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Many of us read that book, right? The only problem is far too many parents read it, were emotionally moved by it, read the last page, closed it, put it back on the bookshelf, and didn't do anything about it. You can't read that book and keep a phone in your child's life. You can't read that book and keep your kids on social media. You can't read that book and keep them playing Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day or all day on weekends. Jonathan Haidt talks about screens are experience killers. When a phone comes into a child's life, when Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft come into a child or teen's life, that becomes the center of their life. It's all they ever want to do. The child brain is going to do what's available to them. So many parents will say, why won't my child just do the task? Why won't they just do the task? Why won't they do chores? Why won't they do homework? Why won't they shower? Why won't they go hang out with friends? We have to stop asking, why won't they do the task, and start asking, what are they doing instead of the task? And if the answer is they're on their phone, they're on video games, then of course that's why they're not doing the task, because screens are available to them. Why would they do a chore? Why would they do homework? Why would they go outside when the screen is available to them? And if screens aren't available to them, is conflict available to them? So, we're currently in this youth mental health crisis and really declining executive functioning skills. We're seeing it with Gen Z now. We're now starting to see Gen Z enter the workforce. And we're seeing very scary statistics about the number of these kids that are young adults now, that are bringing their moms with them to job interviews and are having their moms constantly talk to the hiring managers and having to take, all of these days off from work and all these different things and not being able to be independent. And these are the kids that grew up with smartphones and grew up with laptops at school to prepare them for a tech-filled future. But they're all being passed over for older, more expensive people because they're not seen as competent to work in these tech-filled jobs. So we got sold a lie that more tech as kids prepare them for a tech-filled future. We're finding that to be the complete opposite. So it's not about nature versus nurture. It's about, what are their relationships? Do they have lots of in-person social experiences? And are they having varied experiences away from screens? That's really what it is. That's the best way to develop executive functions.
Thank you. And I think obviously technology is not helping these kids. But I also, this would be a whole nother talk, but looking at previous generations where executive function skills deficits existed before screens. So I think for any of us who are in a family where it is generational, I wonder, genetics. So I think that was kind of the question the person was asking. I think you would touch upon this, but remind us, what is the one thing that parents can do this evening or going forward before we hear from you next week? Is there something that we should be working on? Is there something thinking about? I know you said, let's think in our families, where's that prompt dependence? And so is there one thing that we can work
Yeah,
on?
absolutely. Yeah. So the number one rule of all of executive functioning, parent training is use 90% less language. So we need to learn to stop prompting, prompting, prompting. When it comes to ADHD executive dysfunction parents, it's three main things: morning routine, homework, evening routine. Those three things instantly just raise the cortisol levels for all you parents here today. In the morning, you're no longer the parent, you're the morning routine drill sergeant. In homework, you're no longer the parent, you're now the homework secretary. For evening routine, you're no longer the parent, you're now the evening routine drill sergeant. You need to go back to being the parent. That's it. Your child gains skills when you get your life back. All you parents here need to go back to being yourself. You need your identity back. You need your life back. Parents in this day and age do not have an appropriate work-life balance. You're no longer your name. You're now this person's mom. It's okay for you to take off your parenting hat and have your own life. Have your own friends, have your own hobbies, have your own experiences. Your kid does not need you 24 hours a day like Instagram tells you. Okay? Like Dr. Becky likes to tell you guys. You guys can have your own life and have your own work-life balance. Your kids are going to figure it out. Treating kids like they're fragile has really affected their negative self-talk and all of these different things. This is a generation of youth that has gotten the most socio-emotional classes at school, the most therapy, the most counseling, and they're the most depressed. They've had the most involved parents, emailing teachers more than any other previous generation, being more involved with homework, being more involved in school. Yet, school refusal, chronic absenteeism, negative emotions towards school are at an all-time high. Clearly, what we're doing is not working because we're treating kids as fragile. We're treating them like they can't do anything unless we're involved. How many kids now are graduating high school, getting their diploma, looking back on their entire academic career and realizing I never did anything myself. Everything was someone helping me. A teacher was helping me, a parent was helping me. I can't do things on my own. And then we just ship them off to college 2 months later and expect them to be okay. So we have to start to remember, what are we doing for them that they're capable of doing on their own? So every single one of you need to start to look at your child's screen time. Did I get duped by big text marketing and believe that this makes them more social, that this gives them some sort of social advantage? You know it doesn't. Every single person here knows it doesn't. It makes them more antisocial. It makes them spend more time in their room behind closed doors by themselves. Every minute they're on screens is another minute of them delaying their executive functions. So look at their screen time, look at where you are more involved. Is it the morning routine? Are we not allowing them to experience the negative emotion of being late? Are we too involved in school where there's not enough consequences at school for not getting your work done? Because I'm acting like their grades are a reflection of me. Homework output is not a barometer for your success as a parent. Your child's the homework they complete has nothing to do with your parenting success. And homework is not a predictor of success for a human being either. It's not a predictor of success. So start to look at where you are too involved, where you're losing your identity, where you are creating conflict, creating fights. Eliminate screens, eliminate conflict. Let's put some visuals around the house. We'll talk more about that next time. Replace your verbal prompts with visuals. And yeah, I think that's some of the most important things. Is start to notice where you are too involved and create a plan to do less.
There is a question in the chat. It said, your advice is very different from much of the advice that's available to parents. Why is there a large gap in why is the other advice so prevalent?
Oh, I love that question. Because the information you find on Instagram is purposefully to get likes and shares and follows. That's what parents have to remember. We live in a world now where it's not about the degrees on the wall, it's about the number of followers you have. So if you can make a fancy video and tell parents what they want to hear, you're going to get likes and shares and follows. No parent wants to be told you have to take the screens away from your kid. That's terrifying information. I have never once ever told a parent in all my years of doing this, you got to cancel your kid's phone plan. And they say, okay, I'll do that. No, they turn ghost white with fear every single time because they know they're going to see horrible withdrawal behaviors for 2 to 3 weeks and see their kid really withdrawing from a drug and dealing with really horrible, horrible things. Parenting is not easy, but social media makes it want to seem that way. So what's the best way to get likes and shares and follows? Let's push gentle parenting, low demand parenting. Let's make it all about the nervous system. You notice how everyone talks about the nervous system? Because that's a totally arbitrary thing. Oh, it's your child's nervous system. Just get on their level and co-regulate. And oh, that's not a that's not a negative attention seeking behavior. It's a connection seeking behavior. They just need more hugs and kisses and you to get on their level. These are the things that speak to parents' heartstrings. Oh, your child's just masking at school. Then they come home and they let loose. Like all these different things that just simply are not based in science. It's on Instagram to get likes and shares and follows. And it's not just parenting. I literally just heard this in the gym the other day where someone was asking one of the personal trainers a question, and I heard the personal trainer say, "Please don't get your fitness advice on Instagram. It's all pseudoscience. It's all nonsense. Don't listen to those influencers." And that's what's happening. It's all these parenting influencers spreading pseudoscience that's not based in science. There's over 75 years that show authoritative parenting is the best for kids, not authoritarian. Authoritarian is angry, yelling, drill sergeant parenting. Authoritative parenting is democratic, reciprocal, open communication, clear rules and boundaries. But kids respond best to a hierarchy. Kids respond best to limits. Kids need boredom. Kids need struggle. Kids need play, right? And there's a lot of pseudoscience nonsense out there, and it's making it very, very hard to be a parent.
I think we'd all agree it's very, very hard to be a parent. And I don't know that anyone on this call would deny that our kids need less screens or no screens. And yet, how we do that is the challenge. And so we're hopeful that you can maybe give us some tips. I know there's
Yes.
people that say, you set limits, you set time. And I think without us being able to individually fight back, it feels like society as a collective is going to need to do some rebalancing.
And that takes us back to the last question of why is your advice so different? You now have people on Instagram telling parents, "Oh, screens are actually a regulation tool. They regulate the kids." How many of you have seen that? Those people should be ashamed of themselves. That is very, very harmful advice to be telling parents give them the screens. It's a regulation tool. That's a horrible that is very, very harmful. And that's what's happening. And, I don't want you guys to have to wait until next time to start eliminating screens. Go on my website, download that 100% free guide, and start doing it immediately. Why delay the inevitable? How many of you read The Anxious Generation and did nothing about it? Keeping the screens in the kid's life and have fingers crossed. I hope it gets better. I hope he learns to regulate them himself. It's not going to happen. And the whole concept of they just need the skills to learn how to balance the screens. First of all, nobody here on this Zoom right now has the ability to do that. And we're all adults with fully developed brains. And what's the first thing you look at when you wake up? What's the last thing you look at before you go to sleep? What are you grabbing at every single red light? And we're adults. And we're expecting a 15, 16, 17-year-old to resist their phone and do homework? Resist their phone and do a chore? It's not going to happen. There's no such thing as skills to learn how to balance a screen. That's called a parenting pipe dream that you convince yourself of to keep you from doing what you know you have to do. That's really
And yet
it.
our child at some point is going to go off on their own and they need to figure out how to find that balance because we won't be there.
But
And
that's
so,
but that's but that's when their brain is ready. That's
yes.
18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just
but
thinking for some of us on the call who might have, a sophomore, junior in high school, we're thinking about, oh, a couple of years from now, I'm not going to be there to tell them to
yeah.
put that screen away. And so
Yeah,
I think we could,
they could, yeah, when they're 17, 18 years old, we can start to slowly introduce it into their life, but we have to think about their brain. Do you want to send a screen addicted kid to college where the screen is the number one thing their brain seeks? Or do you want to send a kid to college with a phone for the first time in their life, but their brain is also stimulated by exercise,
yeah.
music, art, face-to-face things? So what stimulates their brain? What gives them dopamine? Is it the phone and only the phone? Or is it a multiple of healthy things? So once the phone does come into their life, it's not this holy grail that becomes the center of everything.
Yeah. There was one other quick question before we end here. They said, I know you'll probably cover this next time, but you did give an example of stopping, visualizing, and talking to yourself. And the example you gave was cleaning your room. Can you just walk us through so maybe we can practice that of what that would look like? Or is that too time intensive? Do we need to say that for
No,
next
not
time?
at all. I'll pull that up right now just so you guys can see it. Let me just grab it real quick. So remember, it's verbal. So all executive functioning starts with non-verbal working memory and visual imagery skills. That's why executive functioning is a fancy term for your imagination. That's why no standardized tests exist to measure executive functioning skills. It's just informal checklists like the Vanderbilt, the brief. Because how are you going to measure someone's imagination? There will never be a standardized test to measure executive functioning skills because it's your imagination. So it's the ability to visualize what you're supposed to look like. So let me pull this up real quick, share my screen. And slideshow, play from current slide. So, of course, that did that. Give me 1 second. Sorry. So I'll just pull this up on the side here. So instead of asking your child to brush their teeth, what you're going to want to do is get an actual image of your child brushing their teeth in the exact place where they are to do it. And these are real pictures from our home programs that we've done. We've helped the parents get a picture of the kid brushing their teeth. We print it out, we laminate it, we put it on the mirror in the bathroom, we put it in the wall in the bedroom, and then they see what they're supposed to look like. Within 2 weeks, mom is no longer verbal prompting, go brush your teeth. The same thing with homework. Get a picture of them doing their homework. It triggers what they're supposed to look like so they know what to do without you coming in and prompting. Because every time you do prompt, you're setting yourself up for a long-winded argument and all their defense mechanisms to not follow your verbal prompt. Verbal prompts don't work. Visuals do. So for the morning routine, for example, instead of like following them around and go get dressed, go brush your teeth, go eat breakfast, let's get a picture of the end result, what you look like at the end. So we get a picture of the child, the teen, in front of the front door, fully dressed, backpack on, lunch in hand, the end result. Remember that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey? What was number one? Start with the end in mind, because that's executive functions. Visualize the end result and work towards it. So we get a picture of the end result and we move towards it. We print it out, we laminate it. If they're younger and need more scaffolding, we can create a visual timeline. Wake up, get out of bed, eat breakfast, get dressed, brush teeth, get bag and lunch, leave, and have that timeline. And we as parents stay downstairs. We don't get involved because the second we provide an audience, we create dysregulation. So parents see the most success when they learn to wait in the car. They learn to take a dog for the walk in the morning. They learn to wait on the doorstep. And that takes a lot of parenting strength to no longer get involved. And yeah, your child might have to be late and they might have to go sign in and explain why they were late. And they might have to walk into class and have everyone be sitting there and kind of watch them walking in late. And that negative emotion is what builds that motivation to not want to feel that emotion again. And then here's an image of what a clean room looks like. And you can chunk it out over time and build it up. So, for example, on Monday, you do purple, Tuesday, blue, Wednesday, orange, Thursday, red, Friday, yellow. And then over time, you remove the colors. Over time, you remove the picture. And they eventually become independent and know how to clean their room from those baby steps towards success.
Thank you for explaining that. I'm
Of
sure we
course.
could talk for a lot longer, but we luckily will have you back again same time next week. I will send out a reminder to the group, and we will also have this video posted hopefully by tomorrow. So thank you very much, Mike. I think you've got us all thinking about a lot of things, and I'm trying to figure out how to get screens out of my whole house. It's just an easy ask,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Hey, it's a big thing happening here. You guys can go on Google and type in Lower Marion, Pennsylvania, and you guys can see what we're doing here to eliminate screens for the entire town and get rid of those horrible school laptops, those one-to-one personal devices at school, which is the worst thing to ever happen to education in the history of education. So look up what's happening in Lower Marion, how all the parents are ditching the phones, ditching the Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft, and kids are reading again. Kids love school again. They're sleeping better. They're eating better. They have more friends, and they're enjoying school a lot more without those stupid laptops. Research all the work that's happening there, and there's no reason at all that Mercer Island can't make national news with all the parents joining together, following the research, and telling big tech, you can't steal our kids. So I think these parent information sessions we're going to start doing together, this is the start of something very, very special. Maybe all of us can join together and go to the next school board meeting and say, get rid of those laptops. We can do that. That'd be an incredible thing. We're not going to sell our kids to Google and Chromebooks and Schoology and Canvas. And if we can all, tell Apple, you're not going to steal my kid from me. And Meta, like we just saw Meta on trial, obviously, they're not doing very good things. They don't care about your kids. If we can all join together and create some change, I think Mercer Island is the place to do it. And the teachers are incredible and the parents are incredible. And I'm really, really excited to continue doing this.
Thank you so
Well,
much
thank you.
for your time.
Of course. Yeah. And I really hope everyone DMs me on Instagram and sends me an email and keeps in touch.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming tonight, and we will see you for the next session.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank
Hope
you.